and welcome to Lutherans Alive. This is the program that highlights Lutheran Christians and their ministries in southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck, filling in for our regular host, Pastor Greg Held, and pleased to be here today with Pastor Carolyn Mendis. Carolyn happens to serve at the Christ Lutheran Church in Millvale and also at the St. John's care home in Mars, Pennsylvania. We're pleased to have her with us today. Carolyn, welcome.
You. Good to be here.
And it is also my understanding that you have a distinction as being one of the longest continually serving women pastors here in our synod and possibly across the ELCA. And so just to ask about that first, in what year were you ordained?
I was ordained in 1974, which was I was from this synod. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Swissvale, and I would have been ordained, I was ordained in this synod, but I did not serve here for about 15 years before I came back to this synod. I was ordained in 1974. That was a year that the old bishop was retiring, and nobody knew who the new bishop was going to be. So it was an election year for our new bishop, and nobody knew what to do with me. I had done my internship in New York State, and fortunately they welcomed me back there because southwestern Pennsylvania really wasn't prepared to have a woman serve on the grounds of the synod. So it was one of those years.
The Lutheran Church has been ordaining women since 1970. So this is the 40th anniversary of women's ordination in our Lutheran Church here in the United States, and sort of rejoicing and celebrating that. But indeed, the journey has not always been an easy one. Could you say a bit about your own call and your own journey, how you came to that back then?
Well, I would say I really came to a sense of moving in that direction when I was in college, although I wasn't really thinking about being ordained. They weren't ordaining women at that time. I finished college in 1970, and while I was in college, that was at Teal College, I was connected with friends, had friends that were going on to seminary, and I also was dating a guy who was interested in Young Life, the organization Young Life. And I didn't really feel comfortable with the Young Life philosophy, but I was impressed that he was so dedicated to that and interested in reaching out to young people with the Christian message. And as time went on, I just started to think maybe I would like to do something in the life of the church. I'd always been a lifelong Lutheran. My grandfather was a Lutheran pastor, and my great-grandfather was a Lutheran pastor. And I believe that even but behind there were Lutheran pastors that stretched back into the 17th century or something like that. There were others in the line, but it hadn't been something I had really thought about doing. But I thought about going to seminary when I was in college in order to just get some courses and perhaps then work in some kind of position in a church somewhere. So I went to seminary in 1970 in the summer, and I decided to go ahead and take the Greek course, even though it wasn't required for me to take any of the other courses there. And I don't know why I did that, because I don't really like languages. I have enough trouble with English. But I decided I'd take the Greek course, and I was there for that 6 weeks course, I guess, during the summer. And that was the summer that they voted to ordain the women. And I started taking the courses, and I just kept taking the courses and taking the courses until I was realized that I had enough to consider ordination. So that's how it came to be. I had grown up in Bethany Lutheran Church in Braddock. That was the church that my grandfather had served before I was born, I think. And my parents had lived there for a while, and then they had moved into Swissvale in 1941 when everybody was afraid of getting called up to go to war. And my other grandfather had bought a house for the price of the land because it had been in a fire. But it was a big house, and they all moved in together. My grandfather, my grandmother, their two daughters, my mother and my aunt, and their two husbands. And we didn't move out. You know, we grew up in that house on the second floor. My dad never did get called up. He went twice, thinking maybe he was going to go off to war, and they told him he had a heart murmur both times, one that never showed up since, but kept him home. And my aunt and uncle eventually moved out, but my dad is still alive. He's 92 years old, and he lives in the same house. So, but I grew up in Bethany Lutheran Church, Braddock. I was confirmed there, and when I went off to college, my parents, that congregation was really in decline, and my parents then joined First Lutheran Church in downtown Pittsburgh. So I was a member of that church then for a while before I was ordained.
You've had the opportunity to say a few words about your family's heritage, your family of origin. Could you say a few words about your family now, your immediate family?
Well, I married my husband in 1975, a year after I was ordained. He was 2 years behind me in seminary and 1 year younger than I, which he delights in rubbing, my nose into. But that makes me the senior pastor, right? Because now we serve together at Christ Lutheran Church. We were married in 1975. I had been ordained in 74, and I was serving up in Millvale. And for that, then we were married in 75, and until he graduated in 1976, we lived apart. I was in Mayville. You see, it was very confusing. I lived in Mayville on Midvale Avenue, and then I moved to Millvale, and I still get them mixed up. But married him in 1975, and we have 2 children. Mary was born first, and then David. And Mary is very active in the congregation we serve now in Millvale. And our son went off into the world for a while, and now he's one of those young men who, well, he's like 27 now, who's crawled back into the nest. So he's living with us for a while, but hope he'll get out into the world again sometime soon.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. We're going to take just a brief break, but we'll be back in just a moment with more with Pastor Carolyn Mendis.